Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Amanda Shee. I'm an anesthesiologist and intensivist. And today I want to talk about 5 reasons why you should not become a physician or a doctor. I, in this channel, try to be really honest with you guys about the things I really love about my job, as well as the realities of what it takes to be an anesthesiologist and intensivist. I wanted to back up and be a little more broad today about just overall some of the reasons why becoming a doctor isn't all that it's cracked up to be. I know when I was a pre-med, I thought that doctors were the most incredible people that I had ever met. They had gone through all of this training, they had all of this knowledge, they were able to help people, they were so smart, and they just were individuals that I aspired to be like. But now that I'm gone through the entire journey, I'm finished training, I'm currently in practice, I'm starting to recognize some of the things that were not apparent to me when I was a pre-med. And that's why I want to talk about these 5 things that I don't think is very obvious when you go into the journey and the process of becoming a doctor that I think is important to consider. So let's just dive in right now. The first reason not to become a doctor is the fact that you will never get back those years of training. And what I mean by that is, while medical school is definitely not as taxing in certain regards as residency, adding medical school plus residency, that time is at least 7 years of your life. That's 7 years of your life you're dedicating almost ridiculous hours to ensuring that you can get your first job as a doctor. Now, that's a really big ask. I personally graduated with an engineering degree, and all of my friends that graduated with me, by the time I was finally done with training, they had already bought a first house, they had already gotten married, had bought their first car, maybe even upgraded their car at one point. But they essentially, for the time that I was in training, were already starting to live their lives. By going down the medical pathway, you are delaying gratification in a lot of aspects of your life. Not to say that you can't go and buy that house, you can't go and buy a car, have a family, have children, but it's definitely a different consideration when you're spending so many hours either studying for exams, studying for the clinical portion of medical school, or when you're working as a resident, and most of the time your hours are going to be at least 60-ish hours a week. And that's not including the time that is spent mulling over some of the patients, wondering how they did, checking up on the chart outside of normal business hours. These are things that most of us do, and we don't account for that when we think about how much time we're working. And so it really is a lot more time than we are physically in the hospital. I just want to make it really clear that all of that time that you go into training, that's time you just can't get back. That's your life you can't get back. And even if you are starting medical training at a later time, so you're a non-traditional candidate or non-traditional pathway, that still means that the time that you go put into that, you really can't get back. So you need to make sure that this is truly the path you want to spend your time on, because that is time you could have been doing something else. The second thing that I wanted to bring up as a reason not to become a doctor is it is so expensive. It is a huge financial investment. Now, this is something that's pretty specific to the United States. So if you practice outside of the United States or get your medical degree outside of the United States, it's actually a very different situation than if you are pursuing medicine, like medical school in the US. Currently, medical students that are graduating from schools have over $200,000 of debt. Many of them do. In fact, I think we're close to an average of $200,000 of debt for a graduating medical student. Now, $200,000, that's just when you graduate. That's not when you're done with residency. That means that you still have to defer your loans, because when you're a resident, you're not going to be making attending pay. So you're still deferring your loans until you finish residency. And residency can be 3 years to 7 years. And if you add fellowship on top of that, it could be a decade before you actually start paying those loans off. Now, one of the things that works against us is compounding interest when it comes to loans. So that means that you may actually actually be paying out hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest, not even just on the principal of the loan that you took out in order to go to medical school. So really sit down and do the math before you embark on this journey, because that is debt. If for some reason you decide that it's not a good fit anymore after medical school, that's debt that doesn't just go away. You have to figure out a way to be able to pay that off. So it's not really that straightforward. It's a huge investment with not necessarily 100% guaranteed returns. The third reason not to become a doctor is that becoming a physician or a doctor right now in today's landscape is quite different than how it used to be. Now, I have not been practicing medicine for that long, but with every passing year, I start seeing additional added layers of administrative burden or other issues that have arisen that make the practice of medicine less satisfying. It has many times I'm noticing now that we have more and more administrative tasks that we have to do in order to get our patients the right kind of care that they should have, instead of being able to spend that time getting to know our patients, getting to care for them, getting to explain to them what it is going on. There are increasing pressures to be able to do all of these things, but not more time in the day and not more pay and not more support. So in fact, I'd say that they're actually reducing with every passing year. Most organizations are actually reducing the support that is available to physicians, which makes the job a lot less gratifying. We went into medicine to be able to take care of patients, and being taken away from that, from the bedside, being removed from the patient care aspect and the clinical aspect that most of us went into medicine for, just makes it a fast track to burnout. So I do want to make that really abundantly clear, is that most specialties have faced increasing administrative burdens and increasing pressures that make the practice of medicine less gratifying. And we just spend less time with our patients, which is why most of us went into medicine in the first place. So something to be aware of. The fourth thing is the practice of cover your butt medicine. So in the US, and again, this is a very US specific thing, we have to carry malpractice insurance because there's always a risk of lawsuits. Now, the majority of lawsuits do not actually go anywhere. Many times our malpractice insurance or our insurance carrier does a really good job with either settlements or identifying why a physician is not at fault in a particular situation, that what was done is within the standard of care. And so from that perspective, it is reassuring, but I do know from chatting with other attending physicians that having a lawsuit named against you can really erode your confidence in your clinical ability and all of the things that you've been working for a decade plus to get to this point as a practicing physician. So I don't think that, I'm not against the idea of lawsuits, because I do think that there are instances of negligence and there are instances in which it is valid to bring a lawsuit against a physician or doctor. However, a lot of the time, medicine is not a black and white type of profession. So it's not always clear what the right answer is. And so as a result, it becomes really challenging to be able to decide, okay, this is what we believe to be the best course of action when we weigh risk and benefits for a patient and explain that to the patient, but then still have a bad outcome. So even if we do everything by the book, outcomes may not end up being what you expect them to be. It's one of the big challenges of medicine. It's what makes it a really stressful field to be in as well. And another reason that many of us in clinical medicine do burn out is that even when you do your best, sometimes there's things that we cannot control and there are things that we cannot anticipate. And so those are things that I think make it really challenging. Anytime we think about the idea that there's always a risk of someone naming a lawsuit against you or someone suing you, that are you practicing medicine because you think that this is the right thing for the patient, or are you doing something because you're scared that you are going to get sued for not doing something that may actually be in the best interest of the patient. Anyway, I made that a little more complicated than it had to be, but basically the fear of a lawsuit really does change the way that physicians practice and can take away a lot of the joy of the practice of medicine. Also adds a really, really high additional layer of stress and adds to burnout for sure. And then finally, the fifth reason not to become a doctor is that it is a guaranteed path to work-life imbalance. Yes, that's what I said. There's no such thing as work-life balance when you're practicing clinical medicine full-time. I do actually truly believe that, because in full-time clinical medicine, no one just works the 40 hours. And while others may make the argument that many different jobs, actually people are spending 50, 60 hours in front of a computer doing emails, things like that. I totally agree with that many jobs nowadays, it becomes really hard because the lines are blurred between what is work and what is home, and when you should be able to turn off completely from work. But the thing about medicine is that it definitely weighs on you. So not only is there a occupational hazard component. So especially in my profession as an anesthesiologist, I am moving patients in the OR. I'm constantly bumping things. I have bruises everywhere because I run into beds, or beds run into me, or equipment falls on me or gets hit or hits me. There's so many things that happen that actually are occupational hazards. I'm constantly on my feet. In fact, I have a bunion that just keeps getting worse because I'm on my feet running around constantly. And that wear and tear really does kind of slow things down and makes me realize, hey, like, is this sustainable? So there's that component of it, and there's just the reality that medicine is an all-encompassing profession. It is something where even if you are part-time, the number of hours you are spending on clinical medicine tends to be over that 40 hours that a typical work week is. Also in medicine, even after being done with training, many of us have to cover night shifts, 24-hour shifts, weekend shifts. The hospital never sleeps, and medicine doesn't just stop because it's a weekend or it's a night. So it is important to consider the fact that that is always going to be a possibility, or always going to be somewhere a part of your practice. And I will say, I'm actually recording this after doing 2 nights in the ICU, that I am exhausted. Even though I got a nap at work, it's still not the same as being on my normal schedule. I can tell that my thinking is a lot slower, that I'm gonna have challenges, or I'm gonna have trouble tonight trying to go to bed because I'm used to now staying up really late because I was in the ICU rounding on patients later and taking care of patients. So long story short, I don't believe there's any such thing as real work-life balance when you become a physician. So that's another reason I would say to not become a doctor. Now, even though I went over these 5 reasons not to become a doctor, I would still do this all over again. Now, those are the realities of my job. Those are the realities of what I do, but the work that I do still is gratifying. I am finding with every passing day that I need to figure out what it is that is important to me. And one of the things I've mentioned before is that practicing clinical medicine full-time probably isn't in the books for me because of the fact that the wear and tear is real. The stress on the body and the inability to actually kind of live my life and enjoy what it is that life offers, the little things, being able to cook, being able to maintain my house, being able to go out and enjoy a dinner with friends and make connections and do all these things, go on vacation. These are things that I haven't had a lot of time to do, even though I'm done with training. And so it is that clinical component that really has been holding me back from being able to do these things. And that's making me realize that while I will always do some sort of clinical medicine, I don't think that it is sustainable, at least for me, for a full-time job for the rest of my career. So I did want to at least share that although these reasons are real reasons not to become a doctor, I still would do this all over again. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like the content, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to hear more from me. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments about the reasons that I just went over about why not to become a doctor or physician. And I am looking forward to seeing you guys next time. Bye.